Additionally, this speaker has told me that anytime he has to speak on stage, the night before he has a recurring dream. I'm not going to say a recurring nightmare, it's not quite that, but it is a recurring dream. He said that every time the night before he dreams that he walks up onto stage and instead of saying his content, all he can do is yell and yell at the audience. Now, I'm hoping he doesn't do that. So I want your help, ladies and gentlemen. I want your help to welcome him on stage and give him a little bit of a taste of his own medicine. So as soon as I say his name, I want you all to yell and shout as much as you can so he comes on and is nice and relaxed. And even if he does yell back, it won't seem so weird, okay? So before I do, I'm going to ask just one little practice round. Okay, welcome, blah, blah, blah. Nice, nice. Ladies and gentlemen, that is fantastic. Okay, so designing for speed, designing for friction. Please welcome our design advocate here at Google, Mustafa Kurtuldu.
And I was rickrolled. I mean, you know, nothing to make me get even more anxious. Hello, everyone. I hate you all already. So my name's Mustafa. I'm a UX designer, design advocate at Google. What I'd like to talk to you about today is speed and friction. But before I get into the talk, so the talk's going to be broken down, so I'm going to tell 3 stories. Then I'm going to give some research on speed and some design tips that you can do. We'll talk about hacking user perception and finally talking about friction. But before I get into that, I want to just give a clear thing of what I mean by speed and friction, because they seem like contradictory terms. So when I'm talking about speed, generally speaking, I'm speaking about technical speed. So when you optimize your images, when you minify code, it's like the technical things that you can do. When I'm speaking about friction, it's the things that you do to slow down the experience and to distract the user, which may seem very counterintuitive. But the stories I'm going to tell will really explain what I mean by that. So if it's confusing for now, don't worry, we'll get there. But if there's anything I want you to take away today, it's the first story I'm going to tell, and I'll keep alluding to it throughout the talk. And it's this concept of occupied time versus unoccupied time. And it's a story of Houston Airport. So Houston Airport had this huge pain point in that their passengers would complain for the time it would take for them to receive their luggage when the plane had landed. And the complaints were really, really high. So what they did was they come up with a solution of optimizing the process of getting luggage to the passengers as quickly as possible. They spent millions on doing this. They improved the process, they hired more people, employed more tech, but then, guess what happened? Oh, and they got it down to 7 minutes, which is quite short, right? But people still complained. If you can see the guy's face going, that's what UX design, what more do you want? So they thought, how about we reframe the problem? Like, you've optimized to the point where 7 minutes is really short. And you'll see this, again, when you're optimizing your websites. The more you optimize at a certain point, you will actually be degrading the experience. So what can you do? Well, if you reframe the problem, it's not necessarily the speed of the bags. It's the waiting that's annoying, right? So they thought, OK, how can we make the wait shorter? So what they started doing is parking the plane further away from the terminal, and complaints dropped to 0. Because if you're using these friction points, you're hacking the perception, and therefore people think, oh my God, my bag's here already. It's very evil, but it works. So it's like 7 minutes, right? So unoccupied time, an idle mind, time slows down to a crawl, and we'll show some research about that. But if you fill it with something, suddenly everything feels really fast. So again, one story to remember. This is great at dinner parties. Everyone always laughs, so you know. See, it works. Worked again. I'll stop now. Right. Okay, so this is the second story, legacy systems. So when I speak to clients and partners and whatnot, they have this problem a lot, where you've got a website which is using an old technology. Like, it'll be great to have PWA, AMP or AMP, or TWA, which is a new thing. But your system doesn't really allow it because it's really old. So what do you do in those situations? Well, this is the elevator story. So a huge pain point, elevators are really slow. Building managers have to deal with this, complaints from their tenants quite a lot. So make elevator faster. How do you do that? Well, you could install a new lift, you could upgrade motors, you could create new algorithms. But the problem is it's not usually feasible to do this, right? It's quite an expensive thing to actually do. So what you find building managers do is they reframe the problem. So they'll say, waiting is annoying. And you hear the waiting, annoying part quite a lot in this talk. So make the wait feel shorter. So what they will do is they'll put up mirrors, they'll play music, and install a hand sanitizer. Because that distracts people, right? You know, it's like, oh. And magically, it feels faster. So when going on to this, I want to make my site feel faster. Start with the small things. Like a lot of us have to deal with legacy systems. It's not possible in the beginning to actually start hacking away and doing like these new technological things. So it's fine. And the last one is the story of search and the concept of passing on the complexity to the user. So way back when, finding stuff on the web was really hard. Because classifying what is good content and what the definition of good was very difficult, right? So what search engines used to do is like one input field and a sea of UI. Because what they're doing is instead of solving the complexity for the user, they're passing on the complexity to the user. It's a complicated problem. It's very difficult, right? And sometimes you'll be faced with these problems, and we can't shy away from the hardness of it. But if you replace solving the UX with just chucking UI, this is what you get. So again, it's like reframing the problem. Finding the wrong content is annoying. So what do? Come up with a better classification system. So our founders, what they did, they were PhD students, right? And in the world of science and academia, the way you can see a good science paper is citations. The more citations, generally speaking, the better the paper. So it's like, OK, citations, links. And that was like the basis of what search was. And then you don't need all that crazy UI anymore. You can simplify it. One search engine, that's one input field, 2 buttons. And that's like so radically different. But it focuses the actual experience. So instead of passing on the complexity, you solve the complexity. So we have this bar, and because I'm a designer, I magically aligned it up to the screens. I'll be honest, I didn't. I just thought, oh, that's really impressive. Wait a second, where's the line? So it's like slow friction, slow experience, high friction, fast high friction, fast low friction, and slow low friction. This is where you don't want to be. So all of these stories, they're really slow experiences, and there was no friction to distract the user from doing, to capture their attention. Like what you find is where you may end up if you're a legacy system, is like the elevator. So okay, what's the small things I can do? And trust me, by the end of this talk, there'll be at least one thing that you can do today, like from the off, without even writing code, I promise you. That's a bold promise, right? But it's true. Fast, high friction. Like I said, most products will get to this point if they start optimizing their sites. Because there comes a point where you can only optimize so much before you start degrading the experience. Now, with search, fast, low friction, this is really hard to get to, I'll be honest, because it's like there's so much technical things to think about here, and it's like text only for the most part. But you can at least try get here, right? But speed is broken down into 2 pieces, like my shoelaces are undone. Real and perceived. So what I want to do is talk about speed. And I'm going to give some data and facts, but this is like the story of the Financial Times. Now, the Financial Times are really, really good at breaking down and segmenting their users. What they do is, it's really expensive for them to target every single user, and their subscription model is actually quite expensive. So what they do is they come up with a clever little algorithm called the tipping point. So they say, based on their own research, when a user is reading at least 5 articles a month, they're on the tipping point. And once they get to 9 articles a month, then they'll definitely subscribe. So they try to push users towards this. So they target not everyone, but specifically the ones who are visiting quite regularly. But what they found is by making their website 1 second faster, they increased engagement for everyone. So if someone was visiting 4 times, they've pushed them to 5, or something like that. So it's really important to be technically fast, right? Optimizing your site is a really critical thing. Conversely, the opposite is also true. And you've probably seen this number, 53% of mobile sites visits are abandoned if they take more than 3 seconds to load, right? And this compounds. Like, for every 2 seconds, bounce rates go up to 50%. And even furthermore than that, conversion drops to by 12% for every second it takes. So technical speed is really, really critical. But user behavior, we have to understand why people are behaving in this way. Because user behavior is affected by many different things. Now, based on the research that we've done at Google for the last few years and personal experiences, I've broken it down to these buckets. You may be able to think of more, that's fine. But based on my experience, these are the things which affect user behavior. So we've got occupied time, which I've spoken about. We have intention, state of mind, state of body. So I'm going to go through examples of that. The catalyst is always important. If you ever do usability studies where you're seeing, you're deliberately slowing down your experience to see how users behave, and you slow it down to it takes 10 seconds for the site to load, what you find is people are still there. And it's what are you doing? What's wrong with you? What that usually indicates is importance. If an experience is really important to someone, they'll stay. For example, you're in a foreign country, maps taking forever to load. You have to wait. You don't have a choice. Or if you need to find the address of a hospital, you're going to wait. You're going to keep going through every single page because it's really critical at that point. You don't want to design for that because that's really bad. But it's an important factor to think about, importance. Now, we're going to talk about intention. So 30% of users are just browsing. When you ask what triggers your web event, they're just browsing. So doctor's office, on the bus, whatever, they're just killing time. This goes up slightly for retail sites to 34%, which makes sense, right? Just idly window shopping. 30% have a specific thing that they want to find out, right? This goes up to 49% for travel, which again makes sense. You want to see what the latest deals are, do the price of travel change during the school holidays, et cetera, et cetera. 29% actually want to do something. And this goes up to 57% for financial services, which makes sense, because no one's I wonder what mortgages are going on today. So intent is affected by many different things. But if we think back to the Financial Times, by making 1 second faster, can we get someone to jump from each of these buckets to actually do something? It's food for thought. Where do users browse the mobile web? When I saw this, I thought it was ridiculous. Most people are browsing from home. It's a mobile device, right? But then you think about logically, Wi-Fi connection, relaxed, calm. If someone's relaxed and they're at home, the web feels much faster. Whereas if they're walking around and standing up, everything feels slower. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but my assumption is that once adrenaline is pumping through your systems, your mind works really fast, therefore everything feels much slower. So if you're sat down and relaxed, you feel really calm. But what's interesting is that the mobile experience is traversed through the course of the day. Most people are browsing on mobile, but making final transactions on desktop. Now, is this a self-fulfilling prophecy? What are we doing wrong on the mobile that people are not completing that? Is there something not quite right? Do people trust desktop more? Is it maybe about images not being big enough on mobile? Can we do something there for the experience? It's something to think about. Now, this was mentioned earlier, the UX hierarchy. The most important thing for people on the mobile web is how long a page takes to load. But if you think of the top 4, the thing I'm trying to find, the site fitting on my screen, how simple it is to use, that's pretty much about perception and speed, if you think about it. The last one, how attractive a site looks, is really depressing because I'm a designer. Now, there may be a thing here that we also have to think about contextually. It's really important that you have brand awareness, right? That your brand is very distinct and discoverable and it makes perfect sense, right? But if the experience is really slow, people start having a weird feeling about the brand. So make your speed your most important thing. I mean, the Financial Times, you know when you're on there. So you can, compromise with these things. But speed is so important. So there is a quick win. So you could start doing this today. 1 second. My laptop went to sleep, and I can't remember my password. Can I get a demo? Please? Yay! So this is Squoosh. It's a progressive web app which I designed. It's a web-based one. You can drag and drop images. I'm not going to do that because you never do stuff like that on stage because it always goes wrong. Just a pro tip. So these are preloaded images. So the idea is, say I've dragged something onto here, and I click on this image. Now, this is the original image. I can see the settings here. And this is the compressed image. So already, if I was to zoom out or zoom in, you can see there isn't much of a difference between these images. But already, I've saved 69%. If I actually increase that, come on, work. Please don't die, please don't die, please don't die. Please. Yeah, 33% smaller. That shouldn't happen. Wait a second, other way around. Please don't die. Yeah, see, 92%. And obviously, no one's going to be looking at the image from this distance. They're going to be looking at it from this distance. So that's one small thing you can do. If you're a designer, send your engineer like optimized images. Just one thing, and you will improve your speed on your site. Can I get back to the slides? So it's squoosh.app. Deliberately hard to remember name, because that's how it works. Because like the average page content on the web is images, so you always have to remember that images cost a lot. So if we optimize images, we can save on our experiences. So we did at Chrome Dev Summit last year, we actually optimized on-stage I/O website, and we reduced the homepage image by 83%. So even we're doing like this. It's such a small thing, and it's worth doing. So please visit the site. It's also free code, so if you're doing stuff with progressive web apps, you want to do pinch to zoom and stuff like that, you can download the code for free and use. Please do. It's on our GitHub account. So speed matters. Like the technical speed is important, right? We've established that. But the perception is also important. So, because remember, occupied time versus unoccupied time. Like this is really critical, the perceptiveness of it. And this is a scary statistic. 1/3 of web users still think technically fast sites are slow. So you've done all the optimization, like Houston Airport. What else can we do here? So perception, one small thing you can do is navigation, putting navigation front and center. Because what's interesting is if a user can't find the button, they think the experience is slower. So, but most of you seem normal. But have you asked this question? I do, because I'm not normal. What makes a button a button? Well, the first thing, you want to make your navigation items be inviting. Like in the physical world, like you have like these buttons which are really appealing. They're encouraging you to tap, press, click, whatever. On screens, we don't really have that, so we don't have those affordances. But you still want to make it look inviting. So how can you do that? Well, we know from research that text buttons like that are really bad for user experience because people can't recognize them. Like you have to take the assumption that people don't know. It's not that users are stupid, it's just they don't know. Why would they know? That does not look like a button. Likewise, these sort of colored without the underline on the web also don't perform as great. But this does because it's encouraging that this is a button. So make your navigational items really clear and recognizable to the users. Their functions should be clear. Now, does anyone speak Japanese in the room? Anyone? Because the rest of the talk's in Japanese. No, I'm just kidding. Right, this was something that happened recently. This Japanese users use an Excel, and they asked a very interesting question. And the question was about this icon. Why is the icon of save a vending machine? That's a Japanese vending machine. The problem with using icons only is metaphors change with time. This user has never seen a floppy disk before. Which makes sense, right? So they tried, like, why? Which is important. Always use a label. Always use a label. I can't, use iconography is good for this. The first time someone sees an experience, they'll read the text. The second time, they'll see the icon. Because it's like muscle memory. They'll see the images much quickly and they'll process it once they know what this thing is. But having text-only buttons, icon-only buttons, is really bad because you leave it down to interpretation. I was going to put this as a slide, but then I forgot to take the picture. I had an epiphany moment. My daughter came up to me, and I have like this toy camera. It's a camera, but they call them a toy camera because it allows light in, so the pictures are quite grainy. And she came up to me and goes, "Daddy, what is this?" I'm like, what? But it makes sense. Her metaphor for taking pictures is this. It's not this. So relying on icons and metaphors is really dangerous. And then if you think about like worldwide, these metaphors can mean different things in different cultures. So always use a label. Now, hidden UX. I'm going to trash iOS, but then I'm going to trash Android as well, so it's all good. 10-year anniversary and all that. So if you're on an iPhone, you're trying to select a piece of text, it's such a pain. You're just doing this, and it's like, no, I just want... If you actually hold down the space bar, the whole pad becomes like a trackpad. And you can move the cursor really easily. And nobody knows this. Everyone's trying it now, I bet you, right? So, hidden UX, Android. If you swipe the URL bar, it will actually go to every single tab. But more importantly, with this new thing, if you hold down the back button, it gives you your histories. And nobody knew that. If you hide your experience from your user, they will not see it. Always keep the navigation front and center. Make the UI recognizable. Make the experience recognizable. If this is part of a really important part of your conversion, it's not going to convert. It's just a fact of life. Visual feedback is really key. So when a user presses a button, so like, things light up. It's really hard to do this on mobile devices because you don't have rollover states, right? But what we do have is a ripple, which I'm going to demonstrate. So this is the typical life of a website that has no feedback mechanism. A page loads. You press a button, engage goes to enrage because you don't know what's going on, and then you press it again because maybe I didn't press it right the first time. And this is normal, right? But what happens with a lot of systems is when you trigger the action again, it restarts the entire action again, and now the user's waiting for that suitcase to come around the carousel. So with material design, we have a thing called the ripple, which is quite popular because it gives this feedback. Like, it's accepting, you're telling the user, I've taken your action, I'm performing your task. And it's a simple thing that you can do. Well, I say simple. The engineer's like, no, it's not. But experience-wise, you're giving reassurances to the user, the feedback mechanism. So let's talk about some friction. Progress bars. You know this one at the bottom? People think that's loading faster because the ripples are going towards the left. I don't know why. People are weird. They're loading the same speed. But that style is kind of out of date now. But when you're animating stuff, if you start the pulsating slow and build up, the experience feels like it's loading faster. It's a very weird thing. It may be the case that in Latin-based languages we read from left to right, so that animating towards the left may be part of that. So if you're like in Israel, Arab countries, maybe it's the opposite. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see that kind of research. But that's quite interesting. OK. YouTube, what it does is you see the bar across the top? It staggers that, because the anticipation, if you stagger, makes the experience feel fast. That's fake. Staggering is really important. Like, animation on the web, it comes with a cost, but when you do it, you have to try and pick your places. So these delightful details are really, really cool to do. Again, it's that distracting the user. Skeleton screens, they're all famous now, well, really popular now. So when you're preloading anything, this is what you don't want to do. A blank screen, because a person doesn't know how long something's going to take. The next thing along that is like the spinner. The problem with spinners is they kind of indicate that the system is broken or hanging. And again, it doesn't really give context to them. Skeleton screens, now when you ask users, they don't like grey boxes. They'll say the site looks broken. And conceptually, this is no different from a spinner. All it's doing is holding back, and then everything loads at once. But if you go back to the beginning with the research where users just want to see the experience load really quickly, that doesn't really work. A better way of doing things is the moment you have content, you show it straight away. Like, don't wait for everything to load at once. Frost images, load pixelated ones first, replace them. But more importantly is metadata. Having contextual metadata, just saying this is the article, the date, or whatever, it gives context to the user that something is coming. Again, it's all about reassuring them that the experience hasn't broken, it's on its way. But again, everything is contextual. So with YouTube, the heaviest thing on the page is the video. So it makes sense that you would load that last. But from a UX point of view, that's the worst thing to do, because people come for a video. They don't come to look at the description. So when the experience is slowed down, you prioritize the video, and you make everything else a skeleton screen. So all of the advice I'll give to you today, treat it like a plate of food, treat it like with your own context, because only you understand your context better than anyone else. Because you have to adapt, like all these things. Now this is like every design talk you'll ever see has one of these images. So like, this is your perfect design. And these are your users. I'm contractually obligated to give one of these kind of image examples. So again, what I'm getting at is context. So this is like Google Photos. What they'll do is you have the loaded images. They'll preload images before a user reaches the scroll. And then you have really low res versions. So if someone really scrolls quickly, you're at least showing them something rather than showing them something blank. So what's interesting when they made the decision, generally speaking, browsers will load images partially blurred. It's like a setting in the browser. What they wanted is like blur them out completely, all of the thumbnails. The problem is if someone's got 100 images and you're applying this like CSS filter, everything slows down to a crawl. So what they do is, okay, let's remove everything and just keep it pixelated, to load as quickly as possible. So when they're preloading, you just get pixelated images. But if you tap on an image, what they'll do is they'll blur the image until the big one actually loads properly. So look, two different techniques, but having like a positive effect. Like I said, you're just doing things like for your own context. Because it's all about, you want the feeling of progression, not processing. So like you see things progressing out and coming back in. The user has some idea of content coming along. And this is like the last one of the day. I've got 4 more minutes. So what Trivago did is they have a progressive web app. When the network connectivity dies, what they do is you have this fun game. What this game does is reassures the user, don't worry, we've saved your settings. We're going to still find that hotel for you, but you can play this game. And they found that, 67% of users continued with the experience. Try pitching that to your boss. But it worked, right? It's not just like these boring little status, like, oh, you're offline, online. You're actually doing something fun and engaging. So to summarize, reframe the problem. It's not just about how to make things faster, it's how can you actually make things less annoying for the users. Keep navigation clear and simple. Be as recognizable to the user as possible. Remember the vending machine? That's a nice story to tell. Avoid blank screens and show content as soon as possible. Now, as a designer, like on the web, if you're using a custom font, it might partially load a system font and then swap to like your font. That looks kind of horrible, but users prefer seeing something rather than nothing. So just show something as soon as possible, and always make sure that you're progressing and not processing. And because I love you all so much for screaming at me, and always park your plane further away from the terminal. Damn it, I forgot that slide. Now, as I love you all so much, I have some resources for you. This is like a book on the web, which is a PDF. I just write this stuff, I don't make it. But it alludes to all of the research which I've spoken about and more things. Also has technical things that you can do to your site to improve on them. Also, a PWA book, which we did in collaboration with Microsoft. It was a PDF. Now there's a website. But guess what? It's not a progressive web app. Do as we say and not as we do. And finally, a poor man's Inception. It's me on a screen. This is a UX course, a free course, which I did on Skillshare, which you can watch. It's an hour-long course where I talk about usability studies, paper prototyping, and whatnot. If you're interested in UX, if you're a UX designer, this stuff will be like standard. But if you're interested in it, please take a look. It helps people get to sleep, apparently. That's what my voice does. And thank you.